How are you today? You're all very, very welcome. My name is Simon Scriver. I am one of the co-founders of Fundraising Everywhere, and I am here as your host, well, simply to introduce our wonderful speakers today and talk you through a bit of the housekeeping. But it is so nice to be here with you today. So nice of you to join us live, although some of you may be watching this back in the recording. But the weather has certainly turned here in Dublin. We are getting colder, and Christmas is ahead. And I know you are all fully prepared for Christmas. That's all in the bag. But as we cast our eye to 2026, we are all gathered here today to kind of understand what are the trends that are going on at the moment, what is happening out there. It is a strange time. So what are our donors, what are our potential donors feeling? And that's going to shape our strategy as we come into the new year. So I'm really excited that we've got Blue State. Blue State have agreed to come on today. And we'll be inviting Anjali and Natalie onto shortly to talk us through their fantastic 2025 UK Giving Behaviours Tracker report and really what that means for us as we look into the new year. So just while I go through some of the housekeeping, if you haven't downloaded that report, there is a link underneath the video as you watch to say download the UK Giving Behaviours Tracker. I do highly recommend downloading that. You'll have that to reference after this session. But also as we unpack it, it'll be really useful there. Also, as we get into this, there will be slides. You'll see a link next to that button down there to download the slides. So again, if that helps with accessibility, if that helps you to follow, then please go ahead and download those now while I do my housekeeping. So my first and most important bit of housekeeping is of course, to say a huge thank you and welcome to our members. Hello to the Fundraising Everywhere members. Thank you for being here today. Just a reminder for you, we do have our Legacy and In-Memory Giving Conference next week. And we've got some fantastic workshops coming up for members only around strategy and things like that. And then, of course, all the other membership benefits that you get. So I just want to say thank you again to our members who lead sessions like this, who ask for sessions like this, which is why we invite people like Blue State on, sorry. But also just thank you to our members for being part of this and allowing us to grow this community and bring more people in. So thank you so much for being here. If you're not a member already, I will still say thank you and welcome. It's so lovely to see you here. But if you're curious about membership, there's a little button below to find out a bit more about membership. Start a free trial, see what's done. If you use it now, you'll get access to the Legacy Conference next week. That's all included in the membership. So there you go. So that's my thank yous and my hellos and my reminders to downloads. I want you to use the chat box throughout this. I am going to be coming on to throw some questions at our fantastic speakers later. So do keep questions coming throughout it. If you're not already logged onto the chat box, you'll see it there. Just pick your username, put your name in there and pop in and say hello to us. And I see people are already using it. So a huge hello to Paige and to Summer. Oh, Summer's here. Fantastic. Rachel, Natasha, Amanda, Gail. Good. We've got loads of people here and loads of people using the chat box and lots of miserable weather out there. But throughout this, please do ask your questions. We'll put them to our speakers. If we don't get to everything, we're here for about an hour. If we don't get to the questions, we will try and follow up afterwards and at least feed them back to our speakers so they know what you're interested in. So please do that. And then remember, at the end of the webinar, you've got your completion certificate. So please go ahead and download that, frame it, put it on your wall, all of that stuff. So I think that's basically it. The last thing for me to say is remember the recording for this. If you do have to chip off early or anything like that, the recording for this will be at the same page. And for our members, it'll go straight into your library. So with all the on-demand content, you'll be able to watch this back at your leisure. That's it. Okay, we're sick of me, aren't we? Let's get going. So I think that's all of the housekeeping. And now I'm very excited to welcome our guest from Blue State to talk us through the report, to look into their magical crystal ball about next year and what we should be doing, what challenges are ahead of us, and how we shape our strategy. So I'm going to see, is Natalie and Anjali with us? Yes, they are.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, I think like everyone, a little kind of tenuous, a little unsure in my own personal life, of course, but also what's going out in the real world. So you guys are going to, I hope, calm us down a little bit and at least talk us through, make us a bit aware about what's going on. Is that right? So may I hand it over to you?
Of course.
Please do.
Cool. Perfect.
Well, thanks. Back on for question and answers.
Awesome. Thank you, Simon. And thanks everyone for your time today. So we'll do some quick intros. Just bear with me. Should be able to try.
Okay,
there we go. And yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ange. I'm the Senior Director of Global Strategy and Insights at Blue State. I've been here about 3 years, and then in previous lives, I used to head up digital marketing and engagement teams at the likes of Save the Children, British Red Cross. So really excited to be here with you today.
Amazing. And I'm Natalie. I'm the Senior Director of Paid Media. So working across sort of global markets, doing everything, fundraising, paid media acquisition and the likes. I've been at Blue State now around 5.5 years. Before that, spent a really good chunk of time in-house at UNICEF UK. So I've been in this non-profit world for longer than I can imagine, which is quite scary, but really, really lovely to be here today.
Brilliant. So we're going to start off taking you through a few of the headlines from our most recent tracker. So if we go to the next. So there have been quite a few key findings from kind of sector-wide findings, donor opportunities, and some ongoing trends. What we'll do is, obviously, you can find all of the full details in the full report, but we'll take you through a few of the headlines. So we're going to start with a bit of context. So, the really encouraging news, as we're seeing in the CAF report earlier in the year, is that there is growth. So, the giving pie is getting bigger. There has been some growth in the last 3 years, an upward trend, a big testament to all the hard work that we know you have been putting in your programs in very challenging times. So, there is a big level of UK generosity, even despite all of the economic challenges and wider uncertainty we have, with the UK population giving 15.4 billion in 2024. So some encouraging trend lines here. What we found in our sample, whereas previous years we saw kind of reductions in donor volume and actually the difference being made up by kind of higher value donors, what we've been seeing here is actually more people are giving. In our sample, about 9 out of 10 adults were giving in some form. And the really encouraging element is when we looked at donation value. So in 2023, it was 165. This year, it's 169 across the UK population. So it's holding steady. So more people giving and donation value holding steady. When we look at that by income level, obviously there is a bit of nuance. So I'll talk you through this. There's a lot of stuff on the slide and you can see it in the report. But the good news is donor numbers are up across all income levels. So if you look at this chart, and you can see the teal, that is this year's data. And you can see regardless of income level, there is growth. More people in each bracket are giving. And that's a testament to the ongoing generosity of all of the UK public, but even especially low and middle income donors are still giving. Yes, we can see, quite understandably, those that are giving kind of at a household income of 15k or less, their average gift value has gone down. That's understandable, but they're still continuing to give, and more so than last year. And then as you see, as we go through the income levels, you can see that broader lower to middle income brackets are still, they did increase their giving by 7 to 8%. And then there's a real acceleration, as you might imagine, as you go through to the higher income brackets. So in household income between 75k and just under 100k, there was a huge 83% increase year on year on the average donation, with donors in that pool giving on average 252. And then when you go up to 100k, on average 750. So that was a 29% growth to last year. So you can see we're up across all, but obviously the higher income brackets bringing up the value. I feel like some weird fundraising weather lady talking through the data, but hopefully it's helpful. But let's go through. So let's think about, okay, well, what types of causes are they giving to? So again, encouragingly, donor volume has increased across sectors. So demonstrating, the ongoing generosity of the UK public. We can see for national UK organisations, it's grown from 78% to 92%. So that real idea of like communities, everyday lives, what's causes that are feeling, closer to home. Encouragingly, though, international organisations have also seen a rise of 12 percentage points to 60%. So again, likely caused by the ongoing humanitarian emergencies such as Gaza and the catastrophic events there. And the UK public continue to kind of step up and really lean in and help and support there. And we've also seen an increase in animal and environmental organisations. So again, animal welfare, climate change, environmental issues that are starting to take kind of media and news narratives that has really compelled people to give to those spaces as well. So some real encouraging trends. Now, what we also saw was donors who increased the value and volume of their donations offset the impact of those who had decreased or cancelled them. So yes, people have, but there is some really good news here. So, you know, we all know, you will know full well with your programs, the last few years have been challenging in terms of regular giving. We've been, you know, I know all of you have been putting a lot of efforts into kind of retention activities to stabilise those cancellations. Now, there's a really, there's a testament to all of this work and some encouraging news for you. So last year, there was a combined cancellation of about 17%. This year, it is just 9% cancellation on regular gifts. So that's really encouraging. Similarly, yes, there is, you know, you can see some people will be like, but 10% of people are reducing the number of one-off gifts as well. Well, again, this is much less than previous years. Previous years, it was 16%, 14%. So this lean into retention activities and really the ongoing engagement is really helping to stabilise that context. Now, we saw some interesting trends. I think we saw this last year as well, but it continues in terms of differences in volume and value. So yes, local causes from a volume perspective, you know, 51% of the UK population prefer to give to a local cause versus only 10% to a global cause. However, there are nuances in value. So encouragingly, even for the local causes, there was a increase in average value gift in the last year, now at £145. And as you can see, as you look further down that chart, that increase and the average value size for global audiences, whilst there's less of them, they are high value donors. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities here for national organisations as well, because obviously they've seen a slightly different trend line. But with national organisations, you could take an approach where you highlight local stories and actually use like digital out of home, effective local geo-targeting to try and bring that local angle. And also there could be opportunities around kind of international based organisations also thinking about your diaspora strategy and how to kind of lean into the international causes, but also recognising the communities here in the UK. And on that note, what our data continues to show is that ethnic minorities continue to be amongst the most generous, and they are quite a significant audience size of nearly 11 million people. So this graph shows you three pieces of data. On the left-hand side is the full sample, so you can see the average across the piece. And then you can see that the black bars are the intent to give, and the teal is your average donation value. So you can see non-white British are showing a higher intention to give and also a higher average gift value on average. And then when we actually unpacked that and looked into their specific kind of communities, black British audiences are showing the kind of most generosity with the highest intention to keep giving. And if my eyes can see, you know, 449, I think, average gift value. So really, really generous. And the second area as well was Asian British are also showing very high intent and really strong donation values. So a real testament to kind of the ongoing support there. We also talked about this last year. We also did and if you haven't seen it, then we've got an in-depth British Muslim giving behaviour report. You can download that separately. But donors of faith continue to be among the most generous. So again, it's the same kind of format to the chart prior. Those with religious affiliation, you can see, have got 71% intent to keep giving and a much higher average gift, £223 on average. We then did a little bit of further digging. And actually within that, Muslim donors continue to be the most generous, the highest intent to keep giving into the following year, and the highest average gift, with Christian audiences following very close behind. But yes, there is that ongoing generosity there. So it's important to think about how to potentially explore that. But as we talked about last year, making sure it's authentic and not and really meets the community where they are. So not doing anything kind of disingenuous. Right, so we've sort of talked about who, what about where? So yes, London still there, and yep, continues to be there for all of the obvious reasons. But there are a few other pockets that we saw in the last year. So Scotland and Northern Ireland have shown themselves as like key locations for high quality donors. So you might want to be thinking about that in your localization strategies. There could be some high mid-value to high value donors there. And the east of England and Wales continue to be also giving powerhouses to keeping an eye on. So we've talked about, why are people giving? So we've got, again, in the full report, there's a bit of qual in there, some quotes that can really help bring this even more to life. And we saw, as you would imagine, motivations vary significantly. So we'll start by looking at how do they vary across generations. So for donors that are aged 18 to 34, so if you're looking at the chart, it's that white color, you will see that, they're more likely to be motivated by the need that they can see in the world and that increased need. And they really have, they really want to do what they can to help. Donors aged 35 to 54, that kind of teal color, they are more motivated by that personal connection to a cause and wanting to make a difference. So they really, they personally relate to the causes and hope things can be made better for those people that are struggling. And what we found in our sample is donors aged 55 plus, so the red in the bar chart, so you can see that one at the very top, personal experiences is really important, as is that sense of duty. They give because they feel personally connected, but also this sense of like, I've got a sense of duty, I've got a moral obligation to act. So there is a variance across these generations. So when thinking about kind of activation, messaging, it's important to kind of think about which bits to lean into. We also saw motivations vary for ethnic minorities. So again, on the chart, it's the teal colour. So you can see for white British audiences in our sample, their motivation to give was very much, again, personal experience was the biggest lever. Whereas you can see for the ethnic minorities in our sample, this idea of the need increasing and like really wanting to help and wanting to kind of be part of a community where each person can play their part really resonated. And of course, making a difference, but I think that is consistent across the piece. So this idea of the need and community is something to also think about when thinking about these audiences. And as you can imagine, there was some variance across household income. So again, for lower income houses, the personal connection was quite important. But as you kind of started going into higher income households, so red bars onwards, this idea of, seeing the need increasing and wanting to help and having that agency, but again, having that sense of community and having that sense of identity and where they have a role to play and can play their part in helping give support. So if that was why, let's think a little bit about, okay, what kind of causes? So again, you will have seen this in trends continue, health, medical research and animal welfare remain the UK's most loved causes, as you can see, as well as children-based charities. Interestingly, we saw both in this view, and I will talk to you about it shortly as well, support for the elderly is also on the rise. So you can see here, elderly people, support for charities that supported them went from 11% to 14%. And we actually also saw it when we dug into brand by brand. So if we go to the next slide, we can see this by an organisation level. So you can see Cancer Research UK, Health Charities, British Heart Foundation, Macmillan, anyone there? Well done. You're continuing to kind of really drive volume and market share. You can see animal related charities such as the Dogs Trust, for example. So again, you've seen growth. There are continuing to rise in popularity. And we can see Age UK also grew. So they're saying they're giving more to elderly, but you can also see in the data 11% in 2023, in 2024, 16%. So I think this idea of UK audiences being more aware of ageing, the importance of like looking after the communities and social welfare is clearly coming through. So this is the same chart, it's just there's so many brands, it's hard to show in one. So this is just the other side of the chart. And so here we continue to see international organisations growing in support. Yes, they are, as we talked about, there's less volume there, but we can see, MSF growing from 3 to 4%, Amnesty growing. And whilst this might be a smaller pool, what we tend to see is kind of them mid to higher value donors. So there is still kind of support there. There was also, sorry, go back slightly. There was also great shift for Care International. Anyone on the call, I don't know if you are, but well done. You saw a 1% to a 5% increase. So we'd love to hear from you and what you saw driving that. We would imagine it to be kind of ongoing Gaza appeal support, and we know you've been working on your brand and also the emergency TV as well. So yeah, if I can't see the comments, but if there's anything, let's give us a shout out. Cool, we'll go to so there's obviously other forms of charitable behaviour in our tracker. And as you can see, the donating clothes, food, signing petitions, yes, there are still high volumes of people doing that, but it is starting to trend downwards. Whereas interest, and when I talk about food, it's like through donating food through organisations. When you look at some of the other options, which are more, I would say, about kind of direct activity, so you can actually see donating directly to someone in need has increased. And really interestingly, we have seen a trend upwards in protest attendance. So that real thing of wanting to stand up for your values and really be out there and make a statement is trending upwards. So we unpicked this a little bit, which is into the next slide, by age group. So, and we're going to be keeping an eye on this one because we're curious. Obviously, the field work was a few months ago, and we've been analysing it. And obviously, there's been even more protests since then. So we'll be really interested to see how this grows and shifts next year. But as this can show, it's most pronounced in the 18 to 34 kind of cohort. You can see that growth. Although you can see it across all ages under the age of 55, that there are just year on year people wanting to stand up for their values, be part of a community and make that kind of different level of engagement. And you can see, I mean, the volume's smaller, but you can also see the older donors there. And that's why I'm really curious about next year, because we've all seen recent events. So let's see what happens there. So again, we realise obviously this is something that not all organisations can necessarily lean into, but could be a really good opportunity for organisations like Shelter, Hope Not Hate, and a few other folks, Amnesty. So this could be a really good way to kind of galvanise engagement. And I think this is the last slide from me. And yes, it's a gaming one. And no, it's not a micro trend, but just an ongoing trend now. It's continuing. And our sample showed, gaming and live streaming are growing giving channels for younger donors. So again, you can see in that teal colour, it's grown year on year from 9% in 2022 to 17% in 2024 for the 18 to 34-year-olds. There is growth, and that's the bulk in this sample. There's also, other studies that do show this is different types of gaming for different types of audiences. So I think it's really important to really think about that group. And again, think about how to authentically engage with that gaming community. How is it embedded in the gameplay and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a really good opportunity to try and meet young donors where they are. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Natalie.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, fantastic. So for this second section, what we basically wanted to do is have a think about some of those key insights that Anne just pulled out and relate them to what we're seeing with all of our client base, organisations that we work with on a day-to-day basis, as well as sort of questioning for everyone in the room, for ourselves, how we can apply these insights to our 2026 strategy. So there's a lot of questions in the next section, questions that we can all be asking ourselves, as well as data and examples to show sort of how those trends have been playing out, essentially. So if we start firstly with that point Ange made about location. So she mentioned that London, Scotland and Northern Ireland show really high propensity to have higher quality donors. And with that, I think a lot of it is down to do with value. So we're really talking about those mid-value donors as an example. And this is fantastic because I think so often in the sector, we sort of, roll our eyes. And when we have to guess where the higher value donors are coming from, we're saying, oh, it's London and it's the South. But not necessarily. So not only did our giving tracker show that, but one example here on screen is an organisation that we work with, a UK-based charity. And for them, actually 10% of their mid-value donors live in Scotland. So really showing the reality behind that data that Anne just presented. And if you look at the pie chart here, not only that, but we've got 15% from Yorkshire, we've got the Midlands there, we've got the Northwest. And actually, if you look at it, London's just sort of down there at 10%, and the South East even smaller than that. So the challenge here, I guess, is to challenge your own assumptions, all of us, and to remember that sometimes London is less prominent than we might think it would be. We're not talking about your mass donor file, because obviously volumes have a big thing to do with this, but we're talking about value and quality. So my question here, and the question for everybody going into your 2026 planning and thinking ahead, is how much do you really know about the value of your donors per region? Now, that might be a lot, which is fantastic, or not much at all. But either way, is your strategy tailored to that? Are you thinking about how you might change your ask amount or your price point strategies or your activity based on the value of donor per region? Because regionality and localization is a really big point of opportunity when it comes to understanding how to segment your file and how to speak to everybody on a more personal level. So a challenge for all of us, but really interesting to see that data there. The second point that came out quite clearly, and I think it's not new necessarily, is that difference between domestic and international support. So global generosity is continued, it's still there, and it is acknowledged throughout the sector that the UK wants to support local causes, although the international support still exists. So the question really, I think, for all of us is, does gift value even out those lower volumes? So Anne's just mentioned it. The average donation value for someone donating to an international cause is higher than a local cause, but maybe the volumes are lower. But does that even out? So one example here with, again, a UK-based charity that we've been working with for the past few years, they work both locally and globally. Now, what this chart shows, without giving numbers, is for the past few years, in one particular campaign moment, their donations are down, but the average value of those donations have increased. So that's a little bit of both. And behind these numbers, when you really dig into it, what you actually see is response rates are much higher against their messaging around the domestic work, but the value of those responses are lower. So again, this is a real nuance and a balance between understanding where you can drive high volumes and where you can drive high value, and acknowledging that both can happen together. And really finding that balance is key to your scalability. So what I've added here is just a screenshot from M&R's benchmarking, which we know is really reliable and also validating what we're saying. So this screenshot just shows us again that each year average donation value varies so much by sector, but it is usually balanced out by the inverse trend in donation volume. Now, maybe this insight is obvious, maybe we know this, but I think what is important is to think about how you're actually applying that to your focus, to your work streams, and to your strategy next year. And one big question, which we actually often challenge our clients with, and we have big, interesting conversations about, do you have a key focus? Do you recognize whether your volumes or your values are your strength? Values as in donation value. Are you spreading your resources too thin and trying to improve all of it at once? Are you looking at every fundraising metric, or are you leaning into the point that has scalability? Can you scale those mid-value donors, acknowledging that volumes will be low, or can you scale those volumes compromising average value? Because together they do balance out and drive positive return if you are focusing on the right element for your organization. So a couple of trends, just really showing that data, just really honing in on what we've seen on the tracker and what we see every day amongst clients, and giving you some examples, but also opportunities. I think one thing we wanted to point out, and we will keep saying this, is there's a lot of hope in that tracker. Yeah. And I think it's been a really tough 18 months, which is what this headline says. I don't think there'll be many organisations that say it's been a breeze when it comes to fundraising and income. But the really positive thing is the generosity in the UK isn't waning. More people are giving. There is sector-wide donor growth. We've just seen those percentage points increases across the majority of sectors. At the same time, the need is ever growing. The good thing is we are a population of people ready to give. But the important element here is we are ready to give if and where the message resonates with us. So it's more important than ever thinking about local messaging, national messaging, international messaging. Are we reaching the right person with the right message? Because if it doesn't resonate, that is when we are going to start to face a problem. So what we wanted to do is, with all of the hope and the insight that's come from that tracker, ask ourselves 3 questions to prompt donor growth in 2026. And these key questions are what we are, inputting into our client strategies, into all of the work we're doing for next year. Quite simple, but also quite thought-provoking. So firstly, do you know for sure which audience segments are ready to give to your organisation at that first touch point? And do you know which audiences need a longer journey to support or to conversion? So do you know where somebody might be more expensive to acquire, but actually will hold value for longer? And do you know where your quick wins are? Really, really important to separate them out and to think about them in two different strategic lenses, basically. Secondly, are you focusing on the right motivators to grab audience attention in the first place? So Anne just talked to you about the variance and the nuance in motivation to give by sector, by age, by household income. Again, do you know that about your donor file, and are you applying that to your strategies? I think it's often easier to say, yes, we are, but does it translate all the way down to your media teams or your media agencies who are applying all of this strategy to the actual day-to-day work? And then again, to my last point, does your organisation prioritise donor volumes or value or both? And are you trying to achieve too much in a difficult moment? This is not to say that we can't achieve both over time, but in moments where the landscape is facing obstacles, challenges, blockers, sometimes we really have to choose our moments and our places to focus in. And that is where we see the most growth. Okay, so moving on a little bit to some sort of specificities and some tactics. So Anne just mentioned that activism is on the rise, looking at the data and looking at the increase of protest attendance, which is fantastic. We're all seeing that. So I think the one question that often comes up is, well, that is very active, that's very real. How do we apply that to our own programs and to our strategies? And the question is, are we clear? Do we understand how we can align someone's mindset and someone's real life behavior with digital action? What we have seen on screen here is an example, again, a UK non-profit organisation we've worked with for a while. But what the graph shows, because it's very small there, I apologise, is an advocacy programme through the lens of lead generation over 2024 and 2025. Now, 24, you can see the blue bars there are lead generation volume, so advocacy sign-up volume, and the CPL. And then you see 2025 with the inverse trend where volumes have gone up and cost per lead has gone down. Now, the difference there is really an understanding about how important activism is to certain segments and leaning into that in messaging and in proposition and in that sort of rallying cry for support. So the question is there a way, is there room in your program for engagement or for advocacy? Can you use data capture? Is that a way to bring new people in? Now, it's been long discussed sort of how challenging it is to bring younger donors in to financially support you. And it's understandable. We're in a difficult moment when it comes to the economy and everyone's disposable income at that early age after sort of graduating and beginning work. But if you haven't done this yet, is there a way in which you can bring younger donors in through a form of advocacy or activism and acknowledge that their conversion journey to financial support will be longer, but at some point that will play out and that lifetime value will prove itself? So really just to think about how and where, if possible, this activism mindset and psychology and behaviour can align with digital action and strategy. Sometimes it feels really easy, depending on what your cause is, sort of environmental causes, really, really easy to show that activism. Some international development organisations find it harder, but I would say right now it is. We have a population, we have an audience who is really ready to support and to show their values essentially on paper, as well as through financial giving. Fantastic. I'm going to mention gaming here because, as Ange said, it comes up every single year, and I think if I speak for myself, and I speak for a lot of people here, we sort of listen to it and we think, yeah, understood, that's great, we'll put it down for later. It feels a lot harder to activate for people, for organisations who aren't already in that gaming space. But year on year, it appears on the list of opportunities. As Ange said, it's not really a micro trend anymore. It is just a full-blown trend. And some organisations have lent into this, and that's fantastic. But if you haven't and you're still questioning it, I would say we only have to look to the US to see where the opportunity for scalability is. Just Googling it, just doing your own desk research shows you how rife, how this trend is growing. So one example here, the screenshot on screen shows the Tiltify Gamers Outreach Programme. It raises millions in a fairly passive manner because you've got a whole community of people who are gaming, which might feel passive when it comes to donating. and to donors, but it's not at all. Gaming for Good activations basically mirror crowdfunding, and they are a perfect example of social proofing. So if you've done work on sort of behavioral economics and the psychology behind giving and how to improve your landing pages, I'm sure you'd have come across the phrase social proofing. But it is in effect seeing other people doing something and wanting to join them and do the same. It is as simple as that. And something like Gaming for Good is a perfect example where you've got a community of people all following each other. And in this example on screen, giving to communities and to organizations through gaming. If it feels, again, too much of a reach for your organization, my question would be, is there anything that can be tested in the meantime? So if gaming feels too big, what is the happy medium? The idea and the philosophy behind it really is crowdfunding. Can you start there and just test whether that works for you before you make a big investment into researching this? But really, there's a lot to gain, and there's a lot of opportunity here. I think it was 17%, wasn't it? Yeah, 17% last year gave via gaming of the UK population, which is quite a lot of people.
Definitely.
Okay, couple of slides here where we're going to go into a little bit more detail. What I've got first is a quick fire round, because I think, as well as examples, a lot of people will just say to us, but what exactly are you doing that is working? Those are all macro trends, but on a micro level, what's working right now? The first one I'm going to speak to just for a minute is segmentation. So we have spent a lot of time in the sector proving and testing that personalization drives a really positive impact on a fundraising ask. So we can all picture this, I'm sure, but to give you an example, splitting that donor file into high, medium and low value donors, and then making sure that that journey online, offline, the giving price point, the ask amount matches their value. That definitely improves conversion rates. It's brilliant. If we translate that to where we are in the digital marketing landscape right now, I'm sure everybody will know or will sort of understand that's not really the reality on platforms right now. Over segmentation in lower funnel conversion channels like Meta and Google, for example, actually just restricts volumes. So we're at an impasse here. We're at a moment in time where we know personalization is fantastic for fundraisers and for conversion rates, but over segmentation in platforms is not working for us. So what I will say is test both. Don't sacrifice that personalization, but do keep your segmentation broad when it translates to that real in-platform activation moment for the sake of channel learnings. Now, it's not sort of easy to find the happy medium, but definitely test. What you want is an audience size that is big enough for your platforms to drive conversions, but also personalized enough to not compromise on value. I think maybe where 2-3 years ago, you might have split them into 5 segments, split them into 2. Think about your mid-value donors and take them on a completely different journey, but really look at their audience size. Broad segmentation, which really leans, and we won't go into this now, but leans into AI and this whole element and this whole world of sort of allowing platforms to learn for you and not segmenting. It really is not untrue. That is where it's working, but we need to balance it with segmentation and donor audience strategy as well. The second one there is challenging passive consumption. So this sort of, again, remains tactical and talks about these channels, but we have worked for a long time in lower funnel channels that drive conversion so sustainably and so comfortably that we don't want to diversify too much. For many reasons, we're in a space where a lot of advertising platforms are really restricting the messaging we can use, the way in which we can talk about our really important causes, the way social issues need to be spoken about is being restricted everywhere, left, right and centre. So this is causing a lot of organizations to start diversifying their portfolio and looking beyond that, maybe that base unit of channels. And this is why I'm talking about passive consumption. So what I'm saying here is channels that we might have written off a couple of years ago, like music streaming, audio, podcasts. We sort of thought that they're just upper funnel brand awareness channels. We're now bringing them back into the mix because we're saying to ourselves, what does that new portfolio look like? How can we reduce our over-reliance on Meta? We've heard that phrase continually. I've spoken deliberately about music and podcasts because we've actually seen a surprisingly active audience when we are running acquisition programs on Spotify, on other sort of streaming apps. We're seeing direct response actually trickling through. Yes, it takes a minute to learn. We need to curate those audiences. We need to find the message that works really well. we actually need to start asking ourselves, which is something I spoke about, honestly, about 5 years ago, almost on a very passive level, but now I really mean it. What does your brand sound like? And that is a question that's really important when we are talking about audio channels. We've said forever, what does your brand look like and feel like? But if we are talking about sort of advertising through podcasts, doing sponsorships with hosts of podcasts and advertising programmatically, what does it sound like and how does that work for you? Despite people sticking their headphones in and walking down the street listening to music, the click-through rate and the volume of people that land and go through to your website in response to an ad on that platform is really surprising. They do take the time to pick up their phone and engage if that message is right. So my takeaway there for you is challenge the assumption, that's the word, and have a look at those passive consumption channels and think about where they might work for you and your brand. And then thirdly, the pillar here, flexible giving. So Ange spoke to this in terms of the data that she showed on screen. Regular giving rates are dropping for many organisations. And if they're not dropping, I'm imagining that the cost of acquiring a new regular giver is increasing. So there's a bit of a 50-50 there. But when we say this and when we look for reasons, we're citing the general state of the economy. We're talking about nervousness around financial commitments in a state of sort of the unknown when it comes to income levels. And this is all completely true, and it is a worry and it's a nervousness for all of us. But my question is, are we actually looking, when we say that, to the e-commerce sector to understand how payment methods are changing? Are we looking at how subscription products and payment models are flexing to the state of the economy? You know, you've got organizations now or brands or subscription products that allow you to pay in a way that suits you. And we know this, and we've talked about this a lot in the world of innovation, but I don't think it's innovation anymore. I think it's pretty critical to how we offer our donors a way to support. If we're not being flexible in the way in which they can give, whether that is staggering a regular gift over 3 periods rather than every single month, and whether that is allowing them to give quarterly, whether that is allowing them to very quickly with one click change the amount that they give. If we're not doing that, then we really are restricting ourselves, and we're cutting a lot of donors off essentially. So flexible giving has been a big title in product development and innovation teams. I would really encourage you in your 2026 strategies to just bring it into business as usual. It might be as simple as looking at your payment methods on your website, and it might be as complicated as developing something brand new, but it's not as hard as it sounds, and it's really, really critical. So I've got 2 challenges on the slide here, and again, just a few more minutes from me, and we can have some nice Q&A. But the reason I put these on the page is hopefully to allow anybody who is either finalising their 2026 strategy. I recognise it's September, budgets are in, we're almost past that point. Or if you're not and you're just starting, that's great. But 2 things to think about. So we've said for the last couple of years that cost per acquisition, so the cost of acquiring a new donor is on the rise. Now that's not wrong. Digital platforms are seeing much more expensive routes to acquisition. We are seeing that everywhere. It's generally known that that is the truth. However, there are pockets of real potential and real hope here. There are unicorn campaigns, as we're calling them. There are moments in time where you will test a new proposition, test a new audience, and it absolutely flies. And in those instances, the cost per acquisition shoots right back down again. And everyone stops and looks around the room and they're thinking to themselves, well, hang on a minute, what have we just done right? And my encouragement here, my urge here is to keep challenging ourselves. When we have the right messaging, the right targeting strategy, the right ask amount per region, per locality, per postcode, whatever it might be, when you find that sweet spot, then we do see those online cost per new donor come all the way back down to £50 or less. We're used to seeing it much more. If we take an average across the whole sector, we're at over 100 now for an average cost per acquisition of a new donor, but that is not always the case. So this is a challenge to yourselves, to myself, to your media agencies, to everyone you're working with. It's not the case that we have to sit back and accept that we are just in a world where everything's more expensive. If we work really hard and find those sweet spots, we do see scalability and we can see things fly, which I think is really reassuring. Yes, it might take more work. I think the time gets shifted, or the expense gets shifted from money to time. And research, but it really, really is possible. And those moments are always exciting. And this is sort of, I'm talking outside of any sort of emergency response now. I'm talking just business as usual. And then the next one, which is, I'm saying this again to myself as much as anybody else, but everything Andrew's presented today and more, everything we read, everything we hear about from our peers in the sector, are we really listening to it? And the reason I'm saying this is we know that the average attention span of adults right now is 8.25 seconds digitally. That's terrifying. However, it's true. But my question is, if we know that, and if we acknowledge that and we roll our eyes at that, why is it then that we are developing creative and propositions that 60 seconds long, that takes 30 seconds to deliver the message? If we're talking really tactically, maybe that takes 10 seconds if we're doing it for digital stories and reels. But still, why are we creating a message, and why are we asking people to give more than they give to any other brand on average? We're asking them for 30 seconds of their time to listen to what we've got to say. And if it's the right message and if it's compelling, they will do that. But on average, they won't. So my question is, are we really tailoring our digital fundraising strategies, not just creative, but strategy in general, to this insight, if we had to be honest? And we can apply this to any given insight. I've used attention span just as an example because it is quite extreme these days. And I'm no better. I get distracted every 10 seconds. but does that align really with what we're asking donors to do? And I think that's kind of the final point here. And everything we've said, there's a lot that is working for all of us. There's a lot of hope. Are we actually taking these points that we are gathering, these data points, and applying them in reality? It's easy to sit in workshops and talk about them, but do they then match what's on paper submitted to the board, and then what is actually in those media plans, or those retention development plans that are getting signed off every month? So just a question for us all to end, and a challenge for me and you as well as anyone else.
Definitely.
Fab. That was 45 minutes of just our voices. I know we've deliberately got 15 minutes left. We wanted to open it up for questions, for discussion. It's been a very interesting year, and it's going to be a very interesting year ahead. So we would love to hear from you, and to answer any questions directly, or just chat together.
Thank you. That was very, very good. Do we have a contact slide? Contact details there, I think is.
We do, but we're gonna. I don't think that on this slide here. There's one email address. Ange and I have our LinkedIn as well that we can pop.
That's okay. Yeah, even just have the Blue State up there so people can find you. Bluestate.co if people want to find out more about Blue State. And if you haven't already downloaded the report and the slides, they are down below. There's buttons to download those in the video. If you're having any trouble with the link, please just refresh the page and that should work for you, and you'll find that. But thank you so much for that. That was really interesting. Anjali, we're only getting half of your face.
There we go.
So I know we'll get your full brain, but we want it all. There's questions coming in, and if people want to keep throwing questions in the chat, that would be great. But definitely the feeling I got from that was hope, and I think you were very careful to kind of keep that instilled. And I think there are really hopeful figures in there. And I suppose my first question is just for people watching this who are maybe feeling like a much tougher time, or maybe not seeing that growth, or maybe they're working in areas where it's not growing. What are your thoughts to them in terms of if they're feeling a little bit of panic now that they're not in a well-performing category, if that makes sense?
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think we were very conscious of this, and I think a lot of what we've spoken about is fairly macro, but I think if you take the micro insight from it, that's where people can sort of start to build in change and see change. So some of the things we've said, for example, just talking about postcode data and regionality, it might be that on the whole things are feeling really challenging, but there will be pockets of work streams that are working well. And I think it also ties in, putting it all together into the point on one of the slides about sort of donor volume versus donor value. Are you trying to do it all? It's not all going to work right now. It's definitely not, but there are elements that can change. So I think my biggest encouragement would be just to focus on one thing.
100%.
One thing
That's what I was
can
going
grow.
to. It's like leaning into, give yourself a break. We know how hard everyone works. Like lean into the area that might show potential, and then when you have time and space, kind of, and we would hope, again, this is pulling it back to macro. We would hope that kind of, even if you're having a really difficult time just now, this trend upwards, we hope there would be a residual effect. So it's kind of like, hang tight, you're doing an amazing job. Keep testing that area, to Natalie's point. Don't try and spread yourselves too thin. We've both been in-house. We know what it's like. Yeah. Really, just try and give yourself the time and space. Try and ask your boss to give you the time and space to lean in, to test and learn that one element. Maybe just lean into that value piece. And then in time, hopefully, we'll continue to see this trajectory. It will then filter out broader across the sector.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, and about not overstretching yourself, but also, it's not these reports, and there's so much great information in this. It's such a packed report. It's not about necessarily completely pivoting your fundraising program, but I know just from listening to you, it sparked all these ideas of, well, even there's a little door that maybe you haven't explored or something for you to start thinking about coming into the year. So it was great. One of the things that really came through for me was this idea of activism, and protest and that voice. And I think as a fundraiser, it's always interesting to think of that bridge between it. And I've heard lots of different speakers say like they're almost completely two separate audiences and never shall they meet. And then I've heard other speakers who really see it as this great channel into the fundraising stage. You kind of touched on that a lot, but maybe you could unpack that a little bit more for people who are in that space.
You wanna?
I
don't mind.
I don't mind. I mean, my gut thought was just that if we're talking about a direct donor, a donor who support you financially tomorrow, then maybe they are separate categories. But also, I think it is so short-sighted to think so, because anyone who is passionate enough to attend a protest and to be in that space is willing to support in some way, whatever it looks like. And it might be 5 years before you see that financial return, but I don't think it's written off.
No, and I would agree with this, and I'm actually reflecting on work in previous organisations in-house where you could take a political action and you can convert it. So, but it's about thinking about, to Natalie's point, what are they passionate about? Don't talk to me about Gaza and then try and sound me a generic direct debit about hunger, because that's not what I'm interested in, as an example, right? But if you take people on a journey and then try and make that connected as an ecosystem and go like, okay, I'm really passionate about this action, talk to me about what I've expressed interest in. And I'd also say, there's testing to be had, I know, and I've seen recently a daisy chain where you're testing regular giving. Fantastic. After seeing some very good content on social on Monday, I think, and then I went and I did the petition, and then I saw the daisy chain ask, which was an RG ask, and I'd be curious, I'd love to hear how that's going. Test, is it an RG ask? Is it a one-off ask about the same thing that you've engaged the interest in? I think, it's like, we just need to meet people where they are. Experience with the creative, with the journey, with the product, and just really lean into, don't tell me about stuff I'm not interested in. I only have 8 seconds. For everyone who's like actually stuck with us for 52, thank you.
I mean, it's almost so obvious, and it makes so much sense when you say it logically like that. It's almost like our sector has been driven to this place where we're looking for that quick conversion. And if it doesn't pay for itself immediately, it's like we dismiss it. But actually, some of these are the most engaged people who just aren't there yet.
100%, and we totally, we totally feel it. We get it. It's really difficult, especially when you're trying to you're trying to do more with less. You've got budgets to manage with the CFO. We get it. We know the pressure. We've been there, and everything we're talking about, it does take time. But I guess it's that bit of, again, if we lean in and we focus on a few bits, and what I was reflecting on, Natalie, when you were talking about the flexible giving, that's just the experience people are getting, supporters are getting from every other brand and touch point. They just expect the same.
And I also think it's important to remember that, if you are doing those kind of tests, or you are thinking about trialing it, 3 times out of 5 it might not work. But I think we're also because it's been difficult, we're so looking for something to work immediately. If 3 times out of 5 it doesn't work, but on the 4th test you see a bit of an uplift, that's where your insiders lean into that. Don't give up on the first test, because it takes, as we were saying, it is time, it's resource, and it's research. But there's going to be something that shows you scalability.
Yeah, that's fair. Amazing. I'm going to do some rapid fire questions. Well, as rapid as I can be. But there was a great question from, I think it was Kate, and talking about gaming, and obviously that's really exciting in the growth fit. But I suppose for people who have no experience in gaming, but also maybe working in an area like if you're fundraising for a church or something where it doesn't seem like a very close connection, is it a space for all, or is it just really restricted to certain kind of niche charities?
I think there's opportunities for all, but I'm going to broaden it out to gamification. So we've been having conversations with other clients. Right? Yes, you can go pure play gaming in where we're talking about gameplay, streaming, and that kind of thing. And oftentimes we find, where people are trying to really lean into that, they actually end up, hiring a gamer and doing that. But on the aspect you're asking about, the principles of gamification you
Mm.
could apply to anything. You
Yeah.
know, like, you know, leaderboard, or you know, oh, you've reached this level. Thank you so much for your support. So I think where there isn't necessarily, you know, time, resource, or a natural affinity you might feel, instead of thinking of it as a gaming product, think about some of the levers of gamification that were applied in, again, just lots of marketing experiences, even if they're not in a game, if you know what I mean.
And it's not just a it could be in real life events, like gamification, the competitive, social. It all comes together, whether it's sort of in a church or in real life or online.
Yeah, absolutely fair. So someone's asked an interesting question about updating the traditional Christmas appeal. I mean, is it dated? Is this something that's still working every year for people? I mean, what should we be doing for those of us who definitely have got our Christmas appeal underway, but we're just curious? What should we be doing this year?
Oh, this is the big one. I think, in summary, the season it is a moment of giving. But my real answer is, like, who is your audience? Because the idea of a Christmas appeal is sort of very nuanced towards the holiday season, Christmas itself. Regardless of what you celebrate, it's really important to understand what is your audience doing in that moment of time. Are they, you know, like, there's so many questions to it. Like, the end of year for fundraising peaks for everybody. So yes, do not give that up. But it doesn't need to look traditional, I don't think, if your audience isn't responding to that traditional ask.
Exactly, 100%. And I know with a lot of organisations that we speak to, you know, we don't do Christmas appeal, it's a winter appeal or an end of year appeal. To try and be a little bit more open. And it's still, we were having this conversation yesterday, weren't we? It's still looking at your BAU and thinking about, okay, well, what's working, and you know, how to set up the campaigns in a certain way so they're not competing.
Yeah, and I think if you're thinking about winter as a traditional concept, no, it doesn't need to look like that anymore at all. What are your donors responding to?
Yeah.
If you're thinking about Christmas as a season, does it need to look festive? No. But it is a moment of giving. So remember that, lean in, but it doesn't need to look like it always has.
Yeah, that's interesting. And test, isn't it? It's never just moving across. Or we always love a little bit of testing. We're coming towards the end. I'm going to throw a couple more questions at you, if that's okay. But I know some people might start to log off. So just a reminder to everyone again before you go, the recording will be here at the same link. There is a link to download that report from Blue State. So I really highly recommend you check that out and stay in touch with the wonderful people at Blue State, including Natalie and Anjali. You can find them on LinkedIn, and I'm sure they love having questions thrown at them. So please do get in touch with them. Someone mentioned about kind of almost like the locality and talked about federated organizations where you have the big head office in London and you have these other offices around. But even just for people who are maybe a local charity looking at the London figures, we know there's benefits and drawbacks to kind of the small local and the big thing. What are your thoughts now? How should they be interpreting these figures?
I think there's a lot of opportunity, actually, because it's that piece of, actually, in terms of volume, more people gave to local charities. So I think that idea of you can actually demonstrate the impact, you can show elements that, having worked at some of the larger international organizations, it can sometimes be hard to show. So I actually think, again, it's leaning into, there's an opportunity, and it's to something you said earlier, don't try and do it all. So if you're actually going to get more volume, rather than the higher value donors of international organizations, lean into really demonstrating the impact in your community, and then try and get that volume, and then think about your onward journeys and your retention, and, you know, slowly kind of migrating people up on an average value. So I think that's some of the stuff to think about.
Yeah, fair. And then I'm going to finish up on this because we are running out of time. But you talked very much about, I can't remember how you phrased it, but really talking about like the efficiencies of fundraising campaigns and looking at the costs that goes into them. And I think that is something which is startlingly overlooked sometimes, that, you know, yes, this is raising more money than this, but actually it's draining staff hours, it's taking them away from other things. If you're a fundraiser who's watching this and you really have never kind of thought like that, or you really don't know where to start on ROI, where would you guys start? How do you work with your clients when you're looking at fundraising strategy and planning into next year? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I think it's about understanding, like efficiencies, resource. If you've got a team who is sort of completely burnt out, overstretching themselves, and their ROIs are just about, remaining positive or not even, that is a chance to stop and look. That is not an ROI positive team as a whole. So we factor in with our clients time, capacity, staff costs, all of it, not just channel return. You've got return on advertising spend, and then you've got team ROI. And if the team is burnt out to just about get an average ROAS, that is not a profitable team as a whole. And I think it's really important right now to think about that. We're in a really difficult time. Everyone's working really hard in this sector, and it's just as important, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, my friends, it's been wonderful. I could actually keep asking you questions. If I've missed any questions in the chat box, we might send them across to you. But again, I would recommend to anyone, please do follow Natalie and Anjali on LinkedIn. Please do reach out to them, and please do download the report, because there's some really juicy stuff in there. And I assume you'll be back next year to kind of give us an update on how we've compared to this. It's going to be even more hopeful, isn't it? Just oozing positivity next year.
We will, hopefully it will.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, but thank you so much for being here and your time. That was great.
Likewise. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, that's it, everyone. Thank you all. I'm sorry if we missed any of the questions. The chat box was a bit active, and actually there was just so much information in there. I was like still digesting. Okay, what does this mean about this? So I do highly recommend, if you haven't got the report, there is a button there to download the report and download the slides. If you were having trouble before, please refresh the page and you'll get them. But have a look at that information, because there's some really juicy stuff in there, and it was triggering ideas for me in terms of next year and what's happening out there. Very interesting stuff about meta, very interesting stuff about gaming, very interesting stuff about just that kind of activism and people's want to help, we want to protest, want to have their voice heard, and how we bring them on that journey to donors. So great stuff in there. Do download that. To those of you who are here for maybe the first time, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this. We've got some great events coming up around legacy and in-memory giving, around individual giving, and all of that. So you can find it all on fundraisingeverywhere.com. You can pay as you go, but if you want to try out membership, there's a button below for starting your free trial where you get access to all of that, plus the on-demand library. So to our members or anyone, well, everyone who's registered here, just a reminder that the recordings will be sat here at the same link. You'll be able to come and watch back. But please do reach out to us if you have any trouble. And to our members especially, thank you so much for being here today. Lovely to see you, but hopefully I'll get to see you at one of the upcoming events, like our members workshop, which is focused on strategy, like that IG conference. I'm really looking forward to hosting that, or being one of the hosts, legacy and in-memory giving, and our recruitment and careers conference, and just lots more happening out there. So please do keep an eye on fundraisingeverywhere.com, and please do reach out to us if we can do anything to help. But take care, stay hopeful, enjoy the rest of your day, and it's been lovely to see you. Take care, everyone.